Well, hello everyone. Here's Sherry right here. I'll talk about for rules and suggestions and also recommendations. And what does it usually mean when we suggest something? It's basically another way of how you want to cause this to where I highly recommend it. Go ahead and try it out. That it works or anything like that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. The way when we think about that though, it's like any source of suggestion that we give to maybe to an older cousin or to a friend of ours or anybody like that, anybody that you're going to be talking to, really, that you probably say too that want to know too that really what's a good way of how you want to describe how you want to describe a suggestion and let's just say that if it's maybe during a meeting or maybe if it is doing any sorts of talk, I'm like, if you're going to be maybe doing like any sorts of text chats or anything like that, anything that you're going to be talking about, anything that you really highly suggest. But let's just say that if we're talking about a group of a group of members, and let's just say if it's all maybe if it's four people that are connected on a group or something like that, and let's just say if you're going to have maybe an older sister or a brother or somebody like that that's going to be connecting, and like I say, is toward it. Whenever you start talking about stuff and start talking about stuff and then start suggesting things and all that. But talk about right here with the vice president right here, and I know that according to what I was reading about though, is like talking about education and also talking about is toward teaching teaching our children, and of course you teaching I feel I'm like if we're going to be talking to anybody in particular, and let's just say that they're going to have a son or a daughter that wants your advice about certain things, that sort of thing. So it's like it's another way of how do you want to call it to where rules and with these rules though, with these if you want to kind of call them the ground rules though, it sure seems that way that you talk to somebody and at the time that the first thing that they're going to maybe say is to where, hey, you wrote you wrote those directions. If we're taking direct orders from based on your coordinations or anything like that. So let's just say that in case if anybody say that, well, you're the captain, you tell me, or something like that, or well, you're the president, you tell me what we're supposed to do and all that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever I read a lot of details about that about what the Democrats are going to do, and of course working with the Republicans and all that, and sometimes you feel I think it is toward well, if we could all really that you're going to make a suggestion, but a lot of times it sure seems that way to where that rules basically come by is to where that whenever people agree on something, right? And let's just say that most of the time, with most of these rules, though, that with those rules that people would need to follow upon biases toward it, well, does that really take us toward the Senate or for Congress to be able to pass a bill, just to be able to agree on a bill, and then of course to make that a law to where what people have got to follow or anything like that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that that when we make a recommendation or a suggestion, it sure seems that way that well, those are not really the rules. They're just really just feedback, and like anybody probably thinking too that you would maybe want to know too that do you think that maybe your parents or your insurance company would maybe explain to you a little bit more about how that works and all, but still that but talk about right here that most of the time though, if we're talking about sisters though, that I was thinking too is toward it, that whenever it comes to understanding budgeting and also getting along with your older sister, and of course getting along with everybody else, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever you make a suggestion, right? Whenever you make a suggestion note, it's something that's highly recommended. You highly it's like another way of how you want to say it, like a request. It's a highly request to to use I guess you say that technique. So let's just say that the technique, and I'm trying to say technique right there, but still the tech not the tech cheek, but the technique. Trying to spell it here. Yeah, the technique. I'll just use that. But anyway, using that. What's really highly request, and I can maybe put like parenthesis or something. But anyway, but if we all know when I'm talking about though, whenever you make a suggestion, about it's another way of how you want to kind of cause is toward it. That if you're trying to improve something, or if you're just trying to spread the word to the party, and let's just say that word to the party would be is toward it. What do you think that could be improved for change? And let's just say that if you're trying to improve something for the better, if we're trying to build back better, in order to be able to build it back better or improve for the better, that there will be suggestions. And so a lot of times everybody else might even say too, improve for the better, talk about for the voice. Is it really about the voice that's really heard, or if it's all about is this story? Well, whenever somebody writes a letter and they're going to go ahead and write a letter about something that they suggest, and then want to know just a little bit too toward it, whenever it comes to rules though. And so how many of us are going to maybe say that with rules though, that most of the time with rules, that those are basically what the rules are, that is toward that those are directions on what somebody would need to follow in order to be able to complete the process correctly, in order to be able to work the process, in order to be able to follow along with whichever of the assignments or anything else, for how the job needs to be done, those sorts of rules, like another way of how to say, it's the directions, but still that before anything that is really required, that there's going to be somebody that's maybe going to make a suggestion, and a lot of times it's like, suggestions and recommendations and all that, so it's like before a lot of those restrictions and everything all come into play. And to me, though, that sounds just a little bit like, you're going to have an older sister that's going to be right there, and she's going to tell you that what you can or cannot do, and then you're going to have like a little sister or somebody, a friend of yours, that's going to be following along and want to know too about the things that you talk about, and the things that you agree to do. And so let's just say that if one of them is about money, I'm like, if you're raising money, if you're, I'm like, money donated, so a lot of times I can go and put on here that it seems like to me that if it's points or if it's money. So, I know I always think about putting points first, but talk about money right here. And so we all know for sure that the exclamation point, you got money right here. And what I mean by money, though, that to me, though, like anybody else would probably say, too, that if you're going to be, through your insurance, that there's going to be some things about the plans that's going to be highly recommended, and before you go into maybe the requirements, so far as what exactly is needed, what exactly is needed before you go into the wants and then the suggestions and all, but still, that when we think about money, though, and I guess I can go and put on here too, is to where money, it's salary, it's salary that for which is supported. So I can go and put on here which is supported, and so everybody else will probably say too that salary, for what for salary that which is supported. So like I can go and put a comma, comma right there. But anyway, there's supposed to be a space right there. But anyway, I know with me though that when we think about rules and suggestions and everything, it sure seems that way. That it seems like almost all the time, people might even say too that if you bet a certain amount of money, and let's just still, and I know like siblings might even say too that you were actually just playing around, or you were actually using it as like a tease, but let's just say that somebody were to say that I bet you $10, if you're right or if you're wrong about something or anything like that. But so it sure seems that way. Like everybody else would probably say too that whenever you bet, whenever you place a bet about something, and what I mean by bet though, Michael, whenever you do like a bet for who's right and who's wrong, and I guess in case if anybody say that for who who's it's like an agreement to who is for who is correct. And I can also put it, from the opposite or something like that. So, like, let's just say that, like in case of anybody that may want to know too, that don't really make a whole lot of sense, really. But I'm just writing down right there to where that a lot of things that really come to my mind, and whenever it comes to suggestions, to where if you want to go ahead and put together right there is a little, paint right there, and then. I paint a picture right there, and you go ahead and say suggestions and recommendations. And well, what does all that really? What does that usually mean when we think about that? Toward if we're talking about stuff that we would for the things that we would like to see based on the things that are talked about, between the Democratic Party and then also the Republicans and the state Senate or anything like that. But still, it sure seems that way, that when we think about that, though, when we think about money, that we necessarily think about is that, trying to, divide it all equally, trying to get even and equal between, each member of the group. So let's just say that, whenever a team wins, and then, for knowing about who gets their half, or so, who gets, yeah. And a lot of times I usually see that sometimes in meetings as to where if once a bill gets signed and approved, or once a bill passes, then what source of award do you think that everybody else will be able to get? So like, what's the award? And so a lot of times everybody else might even say too is toward it, really what is the award here? And the award would maybe be is to where if we say something like if it's $50 per person or something like that, or maybe let's just say if it's 100 or something like that, 100 per person or something like that. So so I guess it's basically another way of how you want to say it is toward that per person, and especially if we're talking about. For any sorts of stimulus checks or anything like that. I think, the stimulus package, if I can recall, it's married couples, it's 500. It's 500 per child, and also it will be up to 12, I think, up to, how much, up to 5, or it might be up to 10,000. I'm like, for married couples and all, but still, that, it's all about the measure, about the taxes and everything. But still, that I know with me though that once a bill passes, and of course once you do succeed into the next level, though, but still, so it sure seems that way that whenever we think about that though, whenever you make a suggestion though, and let's say if that passes, if that agreement does pass, then it's basically another way of how you want to call it, the directions. Those are the guidelines. The guidelines. The guidelines, and then the suggestions, and the directions. The directions right here. So basically, those are the new directions. So let's just say once an agreement is placed, and once a bill does pass, and then a lot of times it's like, those are the new directions. So if everybody were all to listen to what you would recommend, and maybe what you would suggest, and maybe anything. Anything that what you cause is toward anything that you're going to be talking about, really, just to be able to improve for the better, though. So let's just say that in case of anybody say it's all about, it seems like to me that it's all about people following, people following your orders. So let's just say that like everybody else might even say too that if that was the case, and that's basically what it is, whenever you set new rules based on what you suggest and all that. So to me, though, that sounds just a little bit like if you're going to have an older sister or an older brother, or the parents that are going to say is toward that you gotta obey the orders and knowing about what the rules are. And so yeah, whenever you're in my office, I got rules here in my office. Or once you walk into my house, once you're in my house, you have to follow my rules and all that. So it's like, yeah, so if we were to set our own rules, and a lot of times, do you think that maybe if anybody that might even say that, is that really too much to ask for? Or do you think that that's really called a even, or if anything, that, well, but still. So a lot of times it's like, I kind of look at that a little bit more like how an insurance company would work. Besides talking about, maybe if it's what the president, what the president's going to be doing so far as passing a bill or something. But let's just say though that, but if we're talking about is we're talking about recommendations and suggestions, and so it's like, yeah, that for like with me though, that here lately it's like, whenever you want to learn something at your own time, and based on, like anybody say that, if you're your education, if you've only completed 2 years or so of a college level, and a lot of your knowledge and experience, all came from studying a lot, working hard from home, and studying at your own time and all that. So it's like the first thing that's really going to come to your mind is toward that you think that you are, qualified to get into that work environment. So far as working with the professionals and working with the experts and all that about how the equipment and everything is used, and for what all the other, like, yeah, 5 to 10 years of experience and all that. Talk about for being a professional. And so it sure seems that way that talking about right here though that with suggestions though, but still that any meetings that you're going to be at, and like anybody might even say too, that if you're going to be suggesting something, that do you think necessarily that people are going to be listening to you for anything that you would highly suggest, anything that you would really highly recommend? And a lot of times it sure seems that way that well, really, that if people were to listen to you every now and then, and I know, like me though, I feel like that too, to word it, yeah, well, whenever if you think that people are not going to listen to you, then you don't speak up about something, and then they don't realize later that it could have been a helpful tip. It could have been helpful, and so most of the time, people are just trying to be helpful, even though maybe if it may not do no good, but still, just to be helpful. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that helpful tips so far is to realize. And I'll go and put on here to realize immediately. I'm like to realize, to realize it sooner about what the problem is. And so a lot of times it's like whenever you make a suggestion about something, and let's just say that those suggestions are not going to be, heard until maybe a few days or a few weeks later. And anybody might even want to know too that, why is it that you didn't speak up about that? Why is it that at least you could have said something? I'm like, well, people are not all ears, and a lot of times, most of the time, if you were to speak up about something, then yeah, like everybody else would probably say too. If you turn on that radio station and you listen to the conversation, how do you know when to speak up about something, especially listen only mode or anything like that? So let's just say if you're going to be listening to the radio, and then you hear people talking about their problems, or anything else that they don't that they're concerned about and all that, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that like you what you can do. I'm like, yeah, write privately by email on it, but still that I would maybe think too is toward it. Yeah, if you're going to be in a meeting with about maybe 10 people, at least 10 up to 10 people, and think is toward it. Yeah, most of those meetings, they only go on for about maybe 20 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes of the trading conversations back and forth and all that. But really, though, that I guess not everybody. I'm like, yeah, not everybody's going to have their chance to be able to speak up about something, at the meeting. So that's why everybody else might even say too that you feel more comfortable writing a letter, just having like a little conversation with somebody and just say it like a one full complete sentence about as toward it, any helpful tips or anything about that, about the conversation. And the first thing that you're going to maybe think about is toward that anything that you want to talk about, and like anybody say too, is toward talk about for the rules and suggestions and everything. But the first thing that I'm really, and I can tell, be quite honest with everybody here too, whenever I first say something, the first thing that really comes to my mind is toward it, really, not so fast, or do you think that that would work, or do you think that has anything to do with what the situation is? But let's just say that I could start the sentence by saying is toward it, you know, uh, from for what I assume, it is best to to think and realize it's best to think and realize before before the situation happens. And what situation could that be? Well, that situation could be is toward that, a lot of people, I'm like, yeah, not everybody's very happy with the changes going on, the salaries. It could also maybe be a bias toward it, yeah, certain, I'm like, yeah, people, it's like, yeah, somebody could change your mind about something later on. So at the time, you want to know too that the one way that you can get the job done is to where the people say, well, show us your proof. Like, yeah, a lot of times it's proof, and show us the proof about. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, talk about for proof. Any source of verification. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, that proof and verification right there for what you can assume and all, but still, that so a lot of times it sure seems that way that how many people are really going to listen to you if you have a suggestion about something, and that suggestion might even come toward it. People are not going to listen to you. Yeah, they're not going to listen to you. They don't have time to come to you, and so a lot of times it's like the first thing that you're going to maybe think about is toward that, yeah, well, let them realize that later on, or, yeah, that they'll learn the hard way. And a lot of times, people might even say, too, that, when people don't listen to you, yeah, let them, learn the hard way. And you might even say that in all capital letters or something like that. Learn the hard way. Yeah, learn the hard way. So a lot of times, if you're going to be saying anything like that, yeah, learn the hard way, and I can put quotations or anything like that, parenthesis marks, and like, yeah, then learn the hard way. Learn the hard way. Okay, then learn the hard way. Then a quote. Learn the hard way. Then learn the hard way. And half the time you want to know too, well, really, is that supposed to be two words, or is that, but still, then they can learn the hard way. But, still, I know with me, though, that, that hard way, I'm like, but still. But I guess the best way, if I might say, yeah, just to realize, well, what it, but, still, talk about for rules, though, is toward it, in case of anybody that might even say, too, that, that when we're talking about suggestions and recommendations to words that somebody, yeah, someone has more information, yeah, or has experience. I'm going to just use experience. Somebody has experienced a lot more detail. So based on our experience, though, it sure seems that way that, yeah, the way we think about that is that whenever we, based on our experience, though, that if you would highly suggest somebody to follow the directions and all that, then a lot of times it's like, that usually goes by the captain or the queen or, maybe the king or the manager or something like that. But I just really think that, whenever we're talking about, all the other siblings might even say too, that, yeah, a lot of times it's over money. Yeah, money, or if it's about, trying to agree on something or that, but still. But if we're talking about any sorts of rules and suggestions and recommendations or requests or anything like that, it sure seems that way that the first thing that really comes to your mind, though, is that to where that, yeah, well, the rules are, I'm like, you look at the rules, and then any parents can probably say too, that, rules are basically, are the directions toward that, yeah, the things that you can and cannot do, but still, that it sure seems that way that, yeah, number one, that, learning something independently, one thing that yeah, learning at my own time, that's something I did want to talk about too. What do I mean by that? Learning, I guess if you want to call it, independent. Yeah, learning independently, at your own time. So back when we were kids, a lot of times it sure seems that way that was the case. That you want to show your parents, you want to show somebody something that you came up with, something that you thought of. I said, it seems like a lot of kids, people get carried away about that, and also they get real excited about that because, yeah, something that they were able to figure out at their own time, something that works, and a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, how did you come up with that experiment? How did you come up with the results and all that? So a lot of times that I used to always think about that is to where something to be proud of, to where I was able to configure that problem just by as to where that this is how this works and all that. Show me. And so a lot of times it's like you used to, a lot of times you would whenever you would spend maybe the whole day. I'm like, if you would spend all afternoon working on something, and let's just say if you're trying to figure out, okay, how do the pieces go together, and trying to figure out, okay, how something works, and if you want to, learn at your own time and just kind of think at your own, by your own thought. And so a lot of times it's like that one way of how to get people really to coordinate and correspond with what anything that you suggest a lot of times. And it sure seems that way to where that, yeah, there's one person who comes up with the analysis works, one person that reviews the work, one person who is willing to speak up about it. So it seems like, does it really require a team of experts, or does it really require to where you go ahead and talk to that person like anybody, say that, yeah, well, I'm sure that we all have had a lot of talented skills, a lot of experience with anything that we learned independently at our own time. And 102 is toward it, whenever the rules come into play, that pretty much means is that these are basically these are the directions for what someone, like, yeah, if you're trying to complete, if you're trying to do a task or something like that, if you're trying to get the job done, if you're trying to work on a session or something like that, any sorts of scenario, any sorts of training or anything like that, that it sure seems that way to where that, are people really going to listen to what you suggest and what you recommend? Or if anything, that, yeah, well, if anything, just keep that in mind. If anything, if there's enough room, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that that if there's no room for any more suggestions, and almost everybody might even say too, based on from their experience, though, that there is no more room. There is no room to be able to fit any more comments and suggestions. Just to be able to improve the work for the better and all. But let's just say that if we're talking about, right here with the older sisters right here, and in case of any that may want to know too, is to where that, yeah, well, if you can write your own rules, what do you think one of those rules would be? Is to where that, yeah, I'm only going to share one toy with everybody else. Something that belongs to me, I'm only going to share one, or something like that. Or yeah, you're gonna maybe offer somebody a piece of candy, or maybe if it's a, yeah, if it's like a special treat or anything like that. But still, that I know with me though that I, like I mentioned before, talking about when siblings though, that if we're talking about sisters though, if you're gonna have an older sister and you're gonna be talking about some stuff with her, and let's just say that one of those things that you're going to be talking about with her is that knowing about, yeah, you teach them how to play a game, or you teach them how to do something, and you give them an idea, give them a thought of an idea for something, and then they're going to be like, yeah, something like that. So half the time it's like,